Juliana Redding was a rising star with beauty, talent, and ambition. Kelly Soo Park was a real estate agent, with no criminal record and mysterious ties to powerful men. When their worlds collided, it ended in a brutal murder that remains unsolved to this day. Juliana Redding was the kind of woman people remembered. Born in Tucson, Arizona, she had a mix of confidence, charm, and natural beauty that made her stand out from an early age. Her father, a well-known pharmacist, and her close-knit family were supportive when she decided to move to Los Angeles to pursue acting. Like many young women chasing fame in Hollywood, Juliana started with small roles, commercials, print modeling, and appearances in low-budget films. But there was something magnetic about her. She had a presence on camera and a determination off-screen that hinted she might be one of the few who actually made it. In 2007, she landed a role in an indie horror film that gained some attention, and her star was beginning to rise. Her face appeared in magazines, and casting agents started taking notice. She was finally on the verge of breaking into something bigger. It wasn't just her professional life that was gaining momentum. In the glamorous world of Los Angeles, Juliana met a man who would change everything. He was older, wealthy, and powerful, a successful businessman with deep connections in both the medical industry and international investment circles. He drove luxury cars, lived in gated communities, and surrounded himself with influential people. To a young woman new to the city, he seemed like someone who could open doors. He promised to help Juliana's acting career and took an intense interest in her father's pharmaceutical work. He offered to invest millions in the family's business. At first, it all seemed like a dream coming true. Juliana was captivated. Their relationship moved quickly, and he seemed to take control of everything around her. He introduced her to private dinners, elite parties, and connections that could supposedly change her life. But beneath the surface, the relationship had cracks. He was controlling, intense, and quick to anger when things didn't go his way. Over time, Juliana began to see a darker side of him, one that made her uncomfortable. The tipping point came when her father, Paul Redding, looked into the man's background. What he found raised serious concerns. There were financial inconsistencies and questionable business deals. Juliana's father grew suspicious and refused to move forward with the investment proposal. That decision caused an immediate rift. The businessman wasn't just disappointed, he was furious. According to those close to Juliana, the atmosphere around her began to shift. She became more anxious and withdrawn, though she rarely spoke about the details. Juliana decided to end the relationship, but it wasn't easy. He didn't want to let go. After the split, Juliana told friends she felt like she was being watched. Her phone would behave oddly. She felt unsafe even in her own apartment. Despite these fears, she tried to move on with her life, focusing on auditions and her future. But the shadows of her past were still following her. In March 2008, less than a year after breaking off the relationship, Juliana was found dead in her Santa Monica apartment. The city that once promised her stardom had become the setting for her final act. The investigation into Juliana Redding's death began almost immediately after her body was discovered on the evening of March 15, 2008. Her apartment in Santa Monica showed no signs of forced entry, and nothing had been stolen. The scene was violent. Juliana had been strangled and there were signs of a struggle, yet everything else was untouched. Her purse was still on the counter, her phone was nearby. It looked personal, not like a robbery gone wrong. Detectives quickly ruled out random violence. This was calculated, intimate. Someone had been close to her, someone she likely knew. As investigators began retracing Juliana's final days, they uncovered a web of complex relationships and broken promises. Friends reported that she had been on edge in the weeks leading up to her death. She felt like she was being watched, though she never gave details. Her phone was acting strangely. Calls would drop suddenly and strange noises would interrupt conversations. Still, she tried to carry on. She continued to audition, see friends, and live her life. But those closest to her knew something was wrong. Detectives learned about her past relationship with the powerful businessman she had dated months before. He had promised to elevate her career, and offered to invest heavily in her father's pharmaceutical business. But when Juliana's father dug deeper into the man's background, he uncovered unsettling information that raised red flags. There were financial discrepancies, reports of shady business dealings, and ties to foreign investors that didn't add up. He refused to move forward with the deal, suspecting that his daughter was being manipulated. That decision created tension, not just between the man and Juliana's father, but between the man and Juliana herself. She had started distancing herself, trying to break free from his influence. What had once seemed like a glamorous relationship began to feel more like a trap. The breakup wasn't clean. There were heated arguments, late-night messages, and emotional pressure. Juliana was trying to move on, but she was being pulled back into something she couldn't control. Police brought in the ex-boyfriend for questioning. He denied any involvement and provided what appeared to be a solid alibi. Phone records showed he had been miles away on the night of Juliana's death, but as detectives dug deeper, they noticed something unusual. The calls made from his phone around the time of the murder were to a woman named Kelly Soo Park. She wasn't a family member or a friend. In fact, on paper, she had no direct connection to Juliana at all, but her name kept showing up. Further, investigation revealed that Kelly had a long-standing relationship with the businessman. She had worked with him on multiple real estate deals and was closely involved in several of his financial ventures. There were money transfers, emails, and calls between them, especially in the days leading up to the murder. It was too frequent to be a coincidence. As suspicions mounted, police obtained surveillance footage and cell phone data that placed Kelly near Juliana's apartment the night she died. It was the first major break in the case. But what was her motive? Why would a real estate agent become involved in something so violent? The answers would only raise more questions. Kelly Soo Park did not look like someone who would be at the center of a homicide investigation. She was well-groomed, polite, and had no criminal history. On the surface, she was a successful real estate agent in Southern California. But once her name surfaced in the investigation, a far more complicated picture began to emerge. She had been in frequent contact with Juliana's former boyfriend, the same man who had been at the heart of Juliana's troubles. The two had exchanged calls and texts in the days surrounding the murder, and financial records revealed that Kelly had received substantial payments from him over a period of several years. What truly caught the detective's attention was the data placing Kelly's phone near Juliana's apartment on the night she died. This wasn't a vague proximity. It was specific and timed almost exactly to the hours when the murder likely took place. More disturbing still was the physical evidence uncovered inside the crime scene. Despite the absence of any signs of forced entry, investigators found traces of Kelly's DNA on several key items in the apartment. Her DNA was on a broken drinking glass, on the doorknob, and even on Juliana's clothing. The evidence was difficult to ignore. When confronted with this information, Kelly claimed she had never met Juliana. She denied ever being inside her apartment and insisted she had no idea how her DNA could have ended up there. Her story didn't change, even as the mountain of evidence grew. Her phone records, GPS data, and financial connections all pointed to her involvement. Still, she held firm, offering no confession and no explanation. The theory developed by investigators was chilling. They believed Kelly had been sent as an enforcer, a silent messenger to intimidate or pressure Juliana. Perhaps she was meant to scare her into silence or force her family to cooperate in the stalled business deal. But something had gone wrong. Maybe Juliana resisted. Maybe the confrontation escalated. Whatever happened that night, it ended with Juliana's death and Kelly Soo Park at the center of it all. Even more unsettling was Kelly's history. Though she had no prior arrests, her name had come up in other cases involving her wealthy employer. There were whispers of her being used to fix problems, cover things up, apply pressure, or handle matters quietly behind the scenes. She operated in the shadows, and while nothing had ever stuck before, this time the evidence was harder to dismiss. The prosecution believed they had a solid case, a mysterious woman tied financially and personally to a man with a motive, whose DNA was found at the murder scene and who had no credible reason for being there. But the deeper they went, the more they realized just how protected Kelly had been. Her connections were vast, her silence was calculated, and the more she refused to talk, the more it seemed she was guarding someone far more powerful than herself. The case was no longer just about Juliana's murder. It was about influence, manipulation, and how far someone might go to keep their secrets buried. The trial of Kelly Soo Park began in 2013, 5 years after Juliana Redding's brutal murder. By then, the public interest in the case had grown significantly. News outlets picked up the story of the young actress with Hollywood dreams whose life had ended in violence, and the elegant, soft-spoken woman accused of her murder. It didn't look like a typical crime story. There were no criminal records, no gang affiliations, no history of domestic abuse. What unfolded in court was a case built on circumstantial evidence, chilling theories, and powerful associations. Prosecutors portrayed Kelly as more than just a real estate agent. They painted her as a covert operative, someone who had done the dirty work for her powerful employer, the man who had once dated Juliana. They described her as his fixer, a person paid handsomely to make problems disappear. She wasn't a random stranger with a motive of her own. According to the prosecution, she was acting on behalf of someone else. They introduced a timeline of communications. Hundreds of calls and texts exchanged between Kelly and the businessman in the weeks before and after the murder. Surveillance records and cell phone towers placed her near Juliana's apartment during the critical window of time when the crime occurred. And most damning of all, DNA evidence placed her directly at the scene. Her genetic material was found on Juliana's neck, her shirt, and even on broken glass in the apartment. The physical evidence was compelling, and the story the prosecutors told was haunting. But the defense had a very different story to tell. They argued that Kelly had never met Juliana Redding and had never been inside her apartment. They claimed the DNA evidence was not definitive. It could have been transferred indirectly, through contact with other people or contaminated items. They questioned the reliability of the forensic methods and brought in experts to cast doubt on the prosecution's interpretation of the DNA findings. The defense maintained that Kelly had nothing to gain from Juliana's death and no reason to kill her. They also used Kelly's background to their advantage. She had no prior criminal record, a stable career, and a clean personal history. There was no evidence of her ever committing a violent act. Her attorneys argued that the prosecution was trying to fit her into a story without providing direct proof. They emphasized the lack of a murder weapon, the absence of fingerprints, and the fact that Kelly never confessed or contradicted herself in interviews. To some jurors, the prosecution's theory started to feel like speculation rather than certainty. In a stunning conclusion to the trial, Kelly Soo Park was acquitted of all charges. The jury found her not guilty of murder. Many observers in the courtroom were shocked. Juliana's family was devastated. Despite the circumstantial evidence and the mountain of suspicion, the jury had not been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. The verdict sent a ripple of unease through the public. If Kelly hadn't committed the murder, who had? And if she had, how had she managed to walk free? The answers remained frustratingly out of reach. Justice for Juliana seemed to slip further away. In the years following Kelly Soo Park's acquittal, the murder of Juliana Redding has remained one of Los Angeles' most haunting, unsolved cases. The trial, once seen as the best chance for justice, ended without closure. No one else has been charged. The man whose relationship with Juliana brought national attention to the case quietly disappeared from the spotlight. His name, never officially released by law enforcement, remained linked to the investigation in media reports and public speculation. Yet, without formal charges or a confession, the legal system moved on. Juliana's family did not. Her parents continued to speak out, refusing to let her story be forgotten. They believed with unwavering certainty that their daughter had been silenced not by a random act of violence, but by a carefully orchestrated plot. In their eyes, Juliana had become a threat, someone who knew too much, or someone who refused to play along. Her death, they believed, was never meant to be public. It was supposed to be quiet, quick, and untraceable. The problem for the killers was that Juliana fought back. Despite their efforts, no new suspects emerged. The case grew cold, but the interest surrounding it never fully disappeared. True crime forums, podcasts, and documentary filmmakers revisited the case often. Each retelling unearthed new questions and renewed theories. Why did the DNA evidence not lead to a conviction? Why did the powerful man at the center of the story avoid even a formal accusation? And if Kelly Soo Park didn't kill Juliana, how did her DNA end up at the crime scene? Some theorists speculated that the case was an example of influence overriding justice. With enough power, money, and connections, could someone really orchestrate a murder and never face the consequences? Others believed the case was simply mishandled. Evidence that should have sealed a conviction was poorly presented or misunderstood. But a small group believed something even more sinister, that Kelly was merely the front, the one meant to take the fall if things got messy. And when the case fell apart, the true orchestrator slipped away untouched. Juliana Redding's story serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers hidden behind charm, wealth, and influence. She was young, full of potential, and by all accounts kind and ambitious. She had no known enemies, no involvement in dangerous circles. Her only mistake, it seemed, was trusting the wrong person. More than a decade has passed, and no further. Arrests have been made. The Santa Monica Police Department still classifies the case as open, but updates have been rare. Leads have dried up. Witnesses have moved on, and those who may know the truth remain silent. Juliana's memory lives on in her family, in old film clips and modeling photos, and in the unanswered questions surrounding her death. The case is a dark cautionary tale of ambition turned into manipulation, of betrayal hiding behind wealth, and of a justice system that sometimes cannot catch those hiding in plain sight. The question still echoes: who really killed Juliana Redding? And will the truth ever be known?